The following is a presentation of the Maine Department of Education School Finance Team, brought to you by the Maine School Management Association.
Now a great topic, ECSE, Early Childhood Special Education. So, how many of you are were in cohort 1? Oh, okay, so you've got 2 years of experience under your belt. Cohort 2, got 1 year, and then cohort 3, ooh, look at you all. And then we got a bunch waiting on cohort 4. No choice, next year you're in. So I want to thank those that did cohort 1. You were guinea pigs with us. We had 17 SAUs that agreed to be part of this new pilot about the transfer of FAPE special ed services from CDS to SAUs for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds with IEPs. This was brand new to all of us. And that first year was interesting, wasn't it? I hope that it worked out okay. We're still learning. And after 2 years now, we're learning even more. In the first year, we had 17 SAUs. In the second year, we had about 50 SAUs, if I recall. In year 3, we're going to have 150. Now remember, there's 266. Next year, we'll have them all. So lessons being learned, still learning a lot. There's a lot to learn here. The whole reason that the legislature enacted this bill to move, I'll give you the bill, to move the services out of CDS is that CDS hasn't had the capacity and the ability to provide services to every child that needed services for a long, long time. And so the decision was made that SAUs, which are already set up to provide this service for K to 12, and some pre-K already for 4-year-olds, perhaps it would be best if we have the responsibility turned over to SAUs, and then they can still work with CDS, and also work with partners in their community that are providing these services. But the funding and the services will all be coordinated at the SAU level, even if they're not actually given at the SAU. That's the deal. So this started with a transition period of 4 years to get every SAU on board on a volunteer basis for the first 3 years, and then by year 4, everybody needs to be there. So again, we had 17 that volunteered that first year, and it was so helpful for all of us. So what I'm going to do with this presentation is I'm going to go through and I'm going to compare. I'm going to compare ECSE funding and calculations and enrollments and all that with EPS for pre-K. So I'm going to show all of you how we handle pre-K students in EPS now and going forward, how we handle ECSE outside of EPS, and that is pre-K for children with IEPs. I'm going to explain up front. I am a math, business, finance person. I've never been in schools other than when I went to school, and that was a couple of years ago. Shh, don't tell them how long. So I really don't know special ed, but I'm learning. I'm learning as best I can. I now know that an IEP means Individualized Education Plan. And I now know that LRE means, did I say it wrong? Okay. I know that LRE means Least Restrictive Environment. See? A bunch of other terms I'm learning. But if I say something wrong, please correct me. I won't take offense to it. So the biggest difference in statute is the funding. And with funding comes coding. And with funding comes data collections. And all of those wonderful things that we've been talking about all day. It's important that we remember that the coding and the funding are separate for ECSE because we can't have it mixed with EPS because EPS has a state and local share. ECSE doesn't. ECSE is paid 100% by the state. You are not expected to pay anything at the local/state level, okay? You are not expected to. However, along with that comes reasonable and necessary, because it's also all tax money, all taxpayer money, and we need to ensure that that money is being properly used and accounted for. So we're going to talk about that. So the first thing I want to talk about are the enrollments and how that works. EPS does an enrollment collection annually. Basically, October 1, where are your students on October 1? Who are they, and what do they have for demographics? Are they multilingual learners? Are they economically disadvantaged? Are they special education? Annually, once a year, we calculate funding based on that annual calculation, and that's it. Simple. 8 steps, right, Donna? Simple math. ECSE is going to have collections 4 times a year, quarterly. Why are we doing it quarterly? Well, in the world of special education needs for pre-K students, they become eligible at 3. And so when they turn 3, if they've had a referral for an evaluation and are deemed necessary to have, not the right words, eligible, thank you, eligible for services through an IEP, you need to start providing those services right away, correct? Yes. So we need to make sure that they are captured more than once a year for funding purposes. So not only do we collect enrollment data 4 times a year, we also calculate the funding 4 times a year for ECSE, unlike EPS. So the first important information to understand is the collection. It's not just October 1, it's now July 1, October 1, January 1, and April 1, okay? The enrollments still need to be entered into the state information system. It was Synergy, it's now changing to Connect. You're still enrolling them all, including the 3-year-olds. Do 3-year-olds count in EPS? No, they still do not. 4-year-olds count in EPS for pre-K. If, however, you are in a cohort and you have a 4-year-old with an IEP, that student will not count in EPS. It will count in ECSE. So you need to make sure they're enrolled, even those that are at partner sites need to be enrolled in the system. Enrollments will include 3, 4, and 5-year-olds in pre-K with an IEP, except those 5-year-olds that could have moved on to K, but you have held them back in pre-K. Those will no longer count in ECSE. However, they will count in EPS. Hey, you think it's tough for you. We got to do it for everybody. But that's,
Can you repeat that one more time?
I would love to repeat that. If you have a 5-year-old that has already had service for a year in pre-K in ECSE, so they could have moved on to kindergarten, but you've chosen to keep them back for whatever reason in pre-K for another year, that's fine. Not against rules, but funding can no longer be in ECSE at the full 100% for a 5-year-old that could have been in kindergarten. It now will be in EPS for a 5-year-old that would have been in kindergarten, but it's in pre-K.
What about 6, 7, and 6 kids?
6, 7, 6 kids no longer applies.
Oh, we were told we had 1 more year at our other, just webinars and stuff. But I just want clarification because we were told 1 more year.
Who told you that and when, may I ask?
Oh, I'd have to look back through my emails because of the cohort 3, we've been attending all kinds of meetings.
Right.
And so I just want clarification because we were just told 1 more year it was okay for 6, 7, 6 kids.
And if that's true, and I've been given misinformation, I don't know either.
Paula, I think it's a difference in wording.
Okay?
If they're cohort 3, they've not been in ECSE yet, so they can keep those 5-year-olds because they've not.
So, okay, I think you're right. So I kind of said it in a way that maybe didn't apply to you because you haven't been in ECSE. So if this 5-year-old has not been in ECSE yet, they can be funded in ECSE for 1 year, I guess. This is a very complex, weird situation. I don't understand the term 676. I never will. I'm trying, but I understand that it meant, I know 6, 7. This is going on video. Right, and so I'm going to leave it to you experts, and it's going to be an individual discussion with Sandy Flack and her team, and if they're supposed to count for ECSE, they're going to tell me, and I'm going to make sure they do. But my understanding is going forward, after all cohorts are in and established, that the funding will not maintain in ECSE for 5-year-olds that are held back, but it can be then brought over into EPS. Because the counts, the spreadsheets that you all submitted for allocation of funding for the first quarter of this year, which by the way is changing for next quarter, we're going to have it all online, has been submitted, and we've determined the funding, and I'm about to send that to be processed. So if there's somebody that should be there that isn't, please call and ask Jen Hopkins, who can then, we can bring in Sandy Flack and all the other people that know much more than me to figure this out. I know that the 5-year-old thing is a little bit squishy. So I'm actually, that's my term. This is going to be squishy for a number of years, I think, because we're still figuring it out. The statute was vague, and so we're figuring it out. I have said since the beginning, and all of us involved in this, we've been building the plane while we're flying it. I believe this year we finally have landing gear. For the first year, we didn't have wings, and we had one engine, and it was a double-engine plane. We now, I believe, have landing gear. We haven't got seats yet, so it's going to be uncomfortable, but we're getting there. We're making progress. I really believe that, and honestly, I think it's better for the students. I think this is going to be better. What I've heard from the people that have already been part of it is they've seen such improvement so quickly in those that are going into kindergarten already, because they're getting the services earlier than they had been and when they need it. And I've been convinced, and again, I'm not a special ed expert, I've been convinced that if these students can get the services and the interventions that they need early on, then we're not going to have as much need for special ed later on for them. I really believe that's true. So I'm really hoping and praying that this is a great, successful endeavor for all of us. The little details, the logistics of making it work, we're all going to figure that out together, and we're going to come up with a great product in the end. I really believe that. It's likely going to be an example to the nation. Let's do it. All right, so right up until FY27, this current year, the EPS funding took away all of the counts, the attending, the subsidy, and the special ed count. If you had a three doesn't count anyway. If you had a 4 or 5-year-old with an IEP in pre-K, we removed the counts completely from EPS. Because initially, the calculation for funding that we're using, we thought would completely cover all of the overhead for general education and FAPE, as well as special education. And I'll show you the formula in a minute. We assumed that the way it would work is, and I say this assumed because we don't know, which is why we're learning and we're evolving. The way it would work is the funding calculation would cover everything needed for general education, FAPE, overhead, all of those wonderful things for these students, even if they're in a mixed delivery classroom, which we want because we want LRE. See what I did there? I'm learning. However, what we're finding is that to do that and to keep everything separate, you business managers have got to split a teacher in half, 50% charged over here, 50% charged over here. Ed techs, 50% here, 50% there. Now, if they're fully special ed, great. That all charges here for pre-K. But if they're not, then you got to figure out a split. And then there's how much of the business manager's time should we charge over there? How much of the superintendent time? How much of the electricity? How much of this? How much of that? And then we're getting into really nitty-gritty stuff. And so we thought about that a lot this last year. And we came up to a resolution that I hope works. So starting with the upcoming funding for FY28, the collections now, we're going to leave your 4 and 5-year-olds in pre-K with an IEP counts in EPS for attending and subsidy. So you're still going to get funding in EPS for them. No special ed funding in EPS, because that's still 100% on ECSE. But there is going to be funding here. And we're going to keep the funding in ECSE the way we've always calculated it. So we're not removing that from there. We're adding it into here. So the EPS part, we're hoping will cover all that overhead. Forget about the splitting of the percentages and the general ed. We're funding that in EPS. So you don't need to do the splits anymore unless you feel like it's necessary. If you have a very specific teacher that's half and half and you want to split it half and half and you feel that that is legitimate, do it. But for the little overhead things, the 20% of the superintendent, no, we're covering. I realize we're not covering enough of the superintendent in EPS. That's being talked about this year. Hi. Just waving? No. You have a question?
What about minimum contributors?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Because ECSE is completely outside of EPS, and a minimum contributor is only a minimum contributor because of the state-local share, and there isn't a state-local share in ECSE, you get the 100% of funding.
But do we need to calculate, like I've never thought about putting a portion of my time?
Do you need to?
Probably not.
If you think you need to, if there's enough of your time that's going to that and you need to, but ultimately, a minimum contributor can already cover the total cost of education in EPS. And so the whole reason that you're a minimum contributor is that you're able to cover all of that. You see what I'm saying? The piece that the state share would be you're already able to cover. We're going to give you 100% of the calculation. We're not lowering the calculation. That's staying the same. So it might still cover all of that for you without having to put a percentage over there. But if you think it's necessary, that's up to you. We're not telling you you can't. We're saying we think by this correction, it will be enough funding so that you don't have to. We were also being shown that it wasn't enough funding overall on the ECSC side when you started doing all that. And that's another reason that we're doing this. So if you feel like you need to, you can. But every expenditure is going to be reviewed to ensure that it's reasonable and necessary and related to IEPs.
So that would be up to the special education director to verify that everything is reasonable and necessary.
The special ed director for you, and then on our side, we're reviewing everything quarterly to ensure that the funding, and there's a slide later, but to ensure that the funding is fulfilling its need and that you're getting enough funding, because remember, we're covering 100%. So if we're not giving you enough, we're going to fix it. But we've got to make sure that what you're spending and what you're spending it on is reasonable and necessary and tied to the IEPs of the students that you're servicing. So we're going to be looking, in order to ensure that you have the funding in the same year, or at least close to it, instead of waiting 2 years like EPS, like we discussed earlier, you need to upload, and I'm not on that slide yet, but financials so that we can review it. We're going to look at those financials, and we need to ensure that this tax money is being used on items that are reasonable and necessary. I'll give you an example. There was an SAU that said that they needed a van because they have enough pre-K students with IEPs that they need a separate vehicle. They can't just use what they already have and then charge back to ECSC the cost of using the vehicle and the gas and whatnot, okay? That's what I would like to see. Use your own vehicle, charge back for those percentage of pre-K with IEPs, right? Well, they have enough that they need a van completely. Well, that's fine. So we are buying some vans for under this code. But they also wanted a spare van in case the one breaks down. Doesn't seem reasonable and necessary for the tax money I'm paying. So we said no to that. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. Now, when our team is going through your IEP to see about reasonable and necessary, if there's a cost that seems excessive or we're just not sure, It's not that we're trying to tell you how to do your jobs. We're not. We're not going to tell you what the IEP should say. We have nothing to say about your IEPs. That's you and your director and your team. But we are going to review the IEP and say, is this one-on-one in the IEP? Is this one-on-one nurse in the IEP? And I understand that does happen. And if it does, we'll talk about it. Every circumstance, every situation is a discussion. Here are some of the important dates for ECSE and financial data enrollment and financial data collection. Again, it's being done quarterly. We collect the counts as of the first day of the quarter. We want them by 7 days later because we're paying you in the first quarter going forward. So we're paying you in advance. So people that use that R word, this is not a reimbursement model. However, it is kind of a hybrid reimbursement model. I'm going to give you that one. It's going to be a hybrid because in the end, if what we've provided as an allocation of funding isn't sufficient, we're going to give you more to make up for what wasn't enough. But we're also going to review. We're going to review for reasonable and necessary, exactly, because it's our taxpayers' money and we are held accountable and we've got to make sure it's being used appropriately. And I am nothing if not honest and integrity and those words that, and what's the other word that they want to see that they claim we are not? Transparent. So, afraid you're stuck with it because I'm going to insist on it. Yes?
What happens if you give us more money than we end up spending for the quarter?
That's a great question. If you get more than you need, and there's another slide coming up, it's okay. It's all good. You're asking great questions. If we fund you more than you need, we're not going to take it back, but you cannot sweep it into your general fund. It has to stay in this. It's ECSE. It's targeted. It really is meant for only this. Next year, you're going to use it for next year's, and at some point, depending on how much overage you have, we may reduce a future payment to bring you back to even. So the point is, it's not a moneymaker, but it's also not supposed to cost you money at the local level. Does that all make sense? It is going to cost the state money. There's a lot of money in this, and so we've got to do our due diligence. So that's why we give you a very short period. Now, if you need more time, obviously, you know, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get paid later if it takes you longer than this to get the counts to us. So it's not like you won't get funded. It'll just take longer to get you that funding than what we would like to do. As it is in this first quarter of this new year, I'm already at 723 and I haven't sent the money yet. I am sorry about that. I'm working on it. It's ready. I've just got to get it moved in. We're also, by the way, putting into effect a new payment system for it, so that instead of a manual manifest, which is what we've been doing, which takes 7 to 10 days to process once it's sent to our service center, now it's going to go through an automatic process, just like EPS payments do every month, where we can do it in a system that once we push the button, it'll automatically go into where it needs to go, and you might see the money, the payments in the next day or 2 days if you have direct deposit. This will be separate payments. It'll be specific to ECSE, but it will still go to the same bank that you have set up through your vendor code. It's not going to be a separate vendor code. You're still the SAU responsible for the funding. Once you get it, you need to designate it to the revenue code. So in order to ensure that the funding is appropriate, there is also responsibility for submitting financial documents quarterly. So grants for me, even though this is not a typical grant where you have a certain amount of money to spend and you have to spend it first to get the funding, the funding is given to you ahead of time, but we are using Grants for Me as a portal, because you're used to it, to collect the information of trial balances and other documentation that may be asked for by Barb McGowan and her team. They're the ones reviewing all of the expenditures. You also will do quarterly uploads in MEFs of all of your expenditures. which includes your EPS. They're not going to be separate uploads. They're just at the same time. Do them quarterly. Terry Beal will collect them and look at them and ensure that your pre-K expenses are in the correct areas. And then Barb and her team use them to review. So we try to make it so we're using things that you're already familiar with instead of something new. MEFs for the expenditure uploads and the trial balances and whatnot and grants for me. Same enrollment student information system. I just want to remind you the reason for the timely submission of the financial data is to allow the department sufficient time to review the expenditures, assess funding needs, and determine whether there's additional funding required. So it's 100% funding. We want to make sure you're getting the funding you need. All right, how's the calculation done? Well, it's actually stealing from how EPS calculations are done. So basically, we are using the same EPS rate that we're calculating in EPS for elementary is the rate that we're going to use for ECSE for your SAU. It just seemed like that already is determined based on your needs at your SAU, and which is different for everybody. So we're using that rate as the multiplier. We then take that rate and we do a basic count. So these are the same items that Donna mentioned earlier. The basic count times the EPS rate, disadvantaged count, you get a 0.15 weight and also a 0.05 weight. We add for assessment a per pupil amount that changes every year, for technology. So all of those items are included. That's part of that basic general education I was talking about. Even when we start adding those counts back into EPS, we're still going to continue to give ECSE those calculation funded, okay? The big difference between how we do pre-K in EPS and how we do pre-K in ECSE is when it comes to the special education calculation. In EPS, as Ida described earlier, you only get the 1.5% weight for 15% of your special ed students. And then after that, the weight is 0.38. However, in ECSE, we're going to give you 1.5% for every student, because ultimately it's all special ed. And I mentioned already the child find allocation is $1,000 per child for evaluation. If that child is evaluated and they get an IEP, they'll then start on the enrollment in the very next quarter enrollment count, and you'll start getting the regular funding through this calculation. If they end up not getting an IEP, then you would have gotten that 1,000, but they would no longer be on your counts. Accounting handbook. Coding. You guys have heard everything that we talk about today. It's all linked. In order to ensure that you get 100% funding and that it doesn't commingle with EPS and then, what's the word I want? Kind of mess up the calculations of EPS, we've given specific codes. Please keep in mind that this is state share only for ECSE, but there is a local and state share split in EPS. All revenues and expenditures must be separate from the general fund in ECSE. All revenue and expenditures are part of the general fund for EPS. We have a model chart of accounts for both available. The fund code for ECSE has to be 2213. Fund code in EPS is 1000. Please make sure they're separate. No commingling. Revenue code is 3128 in ECSE. Maine Care revenue code is 4508. Maine Care revenue code for EPS is 4585. Something very important, we do want you to bill Maine Care, please. Remember earlier that slide that said that there's $96 million left untouched of federal funds because people aren't billing Maine Care? Boy, that would help us a lot, wouldn't it? So please bill Maine Care if you can. And the way you have to do that for ECSE is you have to enroll one new service location named Early Childhood Services as a service location as soon as possible, because that is how we can ensure that the Maine Care seed and the Maine Care billing is appropriately accounted for. Because as Denise said earlier, ECSE is not seedable. In other words, you as the SAU are not responsible for that portion of the seed. The state is. We will pay for that seed at the state level. Why? Because it's 100% state funded. However, in EPS, the SAU right now is responsible for the seed, which is about 39% of Maine care. Okay? Important to note. And then finally, there's also a state agency client revenue code. If you have a state agency client in ECSE, we are not going to pay you also through the ECSE fund for that student, because state agency client billing is what you should be using for that student through the EFS04, Tyra? Maybe?
I'm sorry.
EFS04, state agency client billing? Yep. So, again, learning something new every day. I learned that yesterday. Payments, again, and I've already kind of mentioned this already, so I won't spend too much time. Oh, look at the first two bullets. Neither of these are reimbursement models. Although, as I did say, ECSE is kind of a hybrid where if you don't get enough, we're going to kind of reimburse the shortfall, okay? But they're really not reimbursement models. They are cost allocation models, hoping that we are funding ahead of what you need based on what we expect you need. We could be wrong. All right, quarterly calculation, ECSE, annual calculation, EPS. ECSE payments will be determined quarterly, whereas the EPS payments, we determined how much annual funding you will be allocated, divide it by 12, and we send you a payment every month. Today, actually, subsidy was paid for, what are we in? What month is this? July. July. So we sent that out this morning. So some of you might see some money tomorrow if you have direct deposit. If you don't have direct deposit, please contact Charlotte and she will set you up. It's really much better for everybody. You'd be surprised how many checks get returned to us every year. Or people call and say, my check got lost in the mail, can you issue a new one? Who does checks in the mail these days, right? So who does?
Not for subsidy, but that's how we pay our own bills.
Oh, you scared me for a minute.
No.
Okay. All right. So a little talk about how the funding will work. In the first month, the first quarter, I should say, for ECSE, it's probably going to be a little lower than what future quarters are going to be. So the funding may be a little less, but in October, when we do a count where you've actually got things moving, school has started, other than just the summer ones, and so counts will likely go up. However, if for some reason in ECSE your counts go down in October, the second quarter, we will be adjusting your allocation down in October, the second quarter. However, here's my promise to you, my pledge to you. If counts go down again, for any reason, in third quarter or fourth quarter from what October funding was, not including child find, I will not reduce your funding any more than what it was in October. So it can go up, but it won't go down based on what October was. Because we realize that you have to maintain staffing, et cetera, for the rest of the year, and it's unlikely that a reduction of counts in the third and fourth quarter are actually going to be a reduction in costs. And again, at the end of the year, we're going to be evaluating, we're going to be looking at your expenditures and ensure that we provided enough funding, and if we didn't, Barbara McGowan and her team are going to say, hey, Paula, I need you to send Richmond some more money because they've been begging for it. Sorry, I'm picking on him today. And I'm going to say, do I really have to? No. I'm going to say, of course I will. And eventually I'm going to get around to it. Just kidding. I'll do it as quickly as I can. All right. Here is how the reconciliation works. You all get it. Timely submission of quarterly uploads. I can't say it enough. Because you know how many people we have looking at your expenditures right now? 2. We're trying to hire some more staff, but we haven't been approved for it yet. So we're doing the best we can to get it done as quickly as we can, to get it backed out to you as quickly as we can if necessary. But the quicker you get it to us, the quicker we can go through it and make things right. So we're doing it as quickly as we can because we want you to have the funding you need. So again, what if your allocation is not performing and your expenses exceed your revenue? Well, we're going to either request a one-time cash push for an overage not expected to repeat in a year or within the year, or we're going to request an allocation adjustment plus one-time funds in an amount that will reconcile prior quarters. So we're going to bring you even. However, and this was asked already, if your ECSE expenses exceed, if your allocation exceeds your expenses, after we review your quarterly submission, we may request an allocation adjustment down for future quarters, or request a reduction in future quarter allocation so that you still have cash on hand to use if needed, but not necessarily take back everything. Does that make sense? We don't want you to go poor either. We don't want you to go broke, but we want to make sure that the funding is properly accounted for. And again, please keep all of the funding in 2213. They're targeted. Please do not sweep them into the general fund. You may realize this happened, and so that's why we're saying, please don't let this happen. What is reasonable and necessary? Well, they are costs schools incur to provide a free and appropriate public education for a student with a disability. It really needs to be directly tied to a student's IEP. It should reflect what would have been paid for the service or item in general circumstances. Examples of reasonable and necessary are salaries and benefits for staff, specialized equipment, assistive technology, supplies, related services, and specialized transportation. We've got resources, lots of resources. I thank you for your time about ECSE. How do you feel about ECSE? You okay? Can't wait. We're doing the best we can, but honestly, some of you had some great suggestions. So please send me an email.
Any questions you have that aren't covered in this video? Go to maine.gov/DOE/funding and click on Contact Us. There you'll find the contacts for the school finance team. Expect a response within 24 to 48 hours. Click on another video within the playlist to continue watching the training.